In Berlin. This was a mic check. It works. Welcome back, everyone. I hope you found the previous discussion quite enlightening and inspiring, and we continue to explore this transformative themes within the tourism industry at ITB Berlin. And our next session really, I think, promises to dive even deeper in inclusivity and accessibility. That session we're about to have is co-hosted by the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, the BMZ, and UN Tourism, and will spotlight the crucial importance of inclusive employment. We had a quick touch base on this in the previous panel, and the implementation of universal design principle across tourism destinations. The panel of experts and industry leaders will share their insight. I think it's going to be very exciting, practical approaches designed to create those accessible workplaces, enhance the opportunities of people with disabilities and also both as valued employees and of course our guests. And for this, I'm really pleased to introduce the moderator for this session, who's, I think, deeply entrenched in these issues, very passionate. He brings that wealth of knowledge and as I said, passion to this discussion. He is the coordinator of Ethics, Culture and Social Responsibility Department at UN Tourism. Please join me in welcoming Igor Stefanovic to the stage. Igor, welcome. Yeah. The stage is yours.
Thank you, Willie. Thank you, Willie. Thank you, everybody. I know it's a tricky part of the day when we get drowsy after the lunch and you can't have coffee anymore if you want to sleep tonight. But we're going to have a lively discussion here. So why are we here in the first place? Well, a year ago, we had a conversation with our long-standing partners from BMZ and GIZ about promoting labor inclusion in tourism. And then we said, why don't we combine it with accessible tourism from the industry perspective, and then we plug it into social inclusion and labor inclusion of persons with disabilities as a win-win combination, because whatever is good for workers with disabilities is good also for customers with disabilities. And there have been some issues and discussions lately that everything that has to do with inclusion is about woke. And what Jane Fonda said the other day when she was getting the award of the American Association of the Guild of American Actors, she said, caring about other people is not being woke. There is nothing woke about that. So it's very important that we are here because we're going to discuss many different issues. We don't have a lot of time, but it's just putting the perspective here into the picture. There have been lots of advancements in accessibility in the last years. We have adopted an international standard on accessible tourism. There have been many advancements on the tour operator side, on the civil society side, the industry, especially the accommodation sector. Many good things have been happening, but we still kind of lag behind when it comes to labor inclusion. When I got my leg chopped off because of health conditions 6 years ago, my nephew, when I got my prosthetic leg, asked me, "Uncle, how can you have any job responsibility or have public exposure when you're just a one-legged man walking around?" And I just said, well, it has nothing to do with my capabilities or my talents. And then he said, well, I never thought of that. I thought that people have one leg and just sit back home and be retired or something, so you really travel around and you do speeches and stuff? I can't believe that. And he was 9 years old. And that made me think, is it something intrinsic that we think that other people are not capable of something? Or he was already taught at the kindergarten that there was a standard body and that there were perfect abilities for a perfect mensch, because he lives in Austria. But I don't think there is perfect mensch. There is no standard human being at the end, because we all come in different shapes and sizes. So let me just thank our colleagues from GIZ, especially Lauren and Alisa, who were our closest partners in these last 12 months, and also Willie for coordinating, for putting everything together, and also my team, Ben and Georgia from UN Tourism, and also our executive director, who is joining us today. And this is like Hollywood Reporter. She was on the cover of the magazine today of ITB, so this is like a Hollywood reporter. So she will be joining us afterwards. You're a star. So let me just call our panelists to join the panel. So we are here as human beings, but we all have numbers for the stage. I'm 1, Igor is 2. So Igor, please, Igor Ambrose. He's the Managing Director of the European Network for Accessible Tourism. Please sit next to me. And Igor is like Pedro Almodovar. He needs to wear his sunglasses because he had an eye surgery recently. I'm just jumping in for you, sorry. Glenn Manjuk is number 2. He is the CEO of the World Sustainable Hospitality Alliance. And now we have Neha Arora, who is the founder of Planet Abled, and she's operating both from India and Austria. Neha, please take your seat. We have Pablo Marañón, who is coming all the way from Ecuador. He's the co-founder of Latin America for All and Huasquila Lodge in the Ecuadorian rainforest. And we have Esther Villena, who is our neighbor. She's working at Amadeus in Madrid as a global head of social sustainability at Amadeus. Thank you so much for joining. And now we'll just dive directly into the first question. How do you approach accessibility inclusion in your own organization or your business strategy? Where did you start? Igor, could we please start with you? What was your starting point, and what's the main mission of INAT?
We started with the gap between the demands of the customers and the supply side, which was not delivering for people with access requirements. And whether we talk about people with disabilities as a category, which generally we don't, or whether we talk about seniors or families with small children, we have to consider everyone as a guest, as a visitor. And when I say we started the organization of the European Network for Accessible Tourism 16 years ago, because we wanted to bring together two communities that were really not knowledgeable about each other, the tourism sector and people with disabilities who wanted to travel and wanted to have travel as a right. Of course, it's a right. It's been a right enshrined in the UN Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities. But more than that, we saw it also. We've been working on projects to do with accessibility, and we saw this as a very clear business opportunity. So you may have heard that before, but we've been gathering information, we've been gathering proof and evidence that it really is a good win-win for businesses, for visitors, and for destinations. So we need to think about working with the businesses, with the destinations. That was our job. That's the role we've taken for ourselves in INAT, to be a B2B organization that can give advice and lead the tourism sector towards being more sustainable, accessible, responsible. Thank you.
Glenn, please.
Fabulous. Thank you, Igor. I represent the World Sustainable Hospitality Alliance that is really focused on what we call net positive hospitality, giving back to the destination for which we have the privilege to operate within. It's extraordinary to see the growth within the industry that have worked together on these environmental and social responsibilities. Where it came for us, you know, as an alliance, we're all about collaboration. So first and foremost, it's about really building bridges between you and tourism, our friend here beside me here, and a variety of other organizations, including the International Labour Organization, and we're the only NGO at the table for the Disabilities Network, which is very important for us to have a conversation around that. We're very focused on training, so training and development. We have a global academy focused on providing training by department in the hotel companies, very focused on inclusivity, and there's a significant part of the discussion around accessibility and ensuring that the labor force fully understands this conversation. We have a pathway to net positive hospitality, and that, of course, looks at standards and guidance for the industry, developed by industry for the industry. We really focus on employability as well. So we have an employability program that helps disadvantaged with soft skills, mentorship, and ultimately employment within the industry. So that is happening around the world. And then finally, it is about capturing best practice within our industry. And there are a number of examples of that. But it's really trying to shine the light on some of those so that it becomes a seeing is believing exercise, so that people understand it's a good thing for business to engage with a labor force that is much more diverse than what we've been witnessing over the years. So that's our role in the conversation, is really to aggregate the conversation within the industry, and it's working out well.
Thank you. Neha, please.
Well, my starting point was my birth. So I'm born to parents with different disabilities. I have a blind father with hearing impairment and Parkinson's, and my mother is a wheelchair user, and I'm neurodiverse. So I'm life trained for most kind of disabilities that you can imagine. And it started because I never went for a holiday, and my parents never went for a holiday until a few years ago. So at Planetable, we do design and operate inclusive group trips where we mix people with various disabilities and non-disabilities to travel together, because we do not need a separate travel company for people with disabilities, and not being segregated based on, oh, you are a wheelchair user, you travel here, and you're a blind person, you travel here, because, of course, there is intersectionality involved. There could be a disabled person, like a person with autism, who is black, who is a woman, and who is from the LGBTQ+ community as well. So intersectionality is something we have to live with, and we cannot put people into buckets. And we use our on-ground travel operating experience all over the world. We have offices in India and Austria, and we operate globally, and we use that experience to help the industry become accessible and inclusive by design for all types of disabilities. So putting accessibility and inclusion into the frameworks, practices, and the policies of the tourism stakeholders, getting over the barriers that are brought by digital inaccessibility, societal stigmas, or our biases that exist in all of us. And yeah, that's what we have been trying to do.
Thank you. Now we go all the way to Ecuador.
Thank you very much. First of all, the way we approach and understand accessibility, for us, it's a practical, common sense, guided by common sense integration process, how we approach accessibility. Maybe the main reason for that is how we got involved in accessible tourism. We got involved in it 18 years ago. Just as a coincidence, some guest called us and asked us if we could help him with accommodation. Back then, we had no idea about accessible tourism, about actually no contact at all. And then he told us that he just wanted to book a room for 3 weeks. He had MS, multiple sclerosis. Back then, we didn't even know what that was. He told us he was in his initial stage. He could still walk. And we just booked a room for him in the 2nd floor. The night he arrived, the airline lost his scooter. He was on a wheelchair from the airline. He couldn't make one single step, so you can imagine how that night was for everyone. Yeah, that's how we got our first contact with accessible tourism. And after that, we really learned with him, like for a week or two, tried to understand how difficult it was. And we decided afterwards to start doing this professionally. So maybe that's the main reason that we approach this in the practical way. We learned by doing. We were really like, when you went to swim, someone throw us in the pool. That's what happened with us. Then the next year, we can finally find an organization that could help us to get more professional ways of working. And after 2 or 3 years, we started our company. And right now, we are offering accessible tours in Ecuador, in Peru, in Argentina, and in Colombia, always with local partners. That's very interesting that we don't do everything ourselves. We see how the awareness is raising, how the interest of the providers is raising. And we are happy to share with you that right now, we see everywhere we go more initiatives working on accessible tourism, and are very happy about it.
Thank you. Esther, can you please tell us what was the starting point for Amadeus? But you can also maybe start sharing some practices that you implement in your business.
Yeah, so as you know, Amadeus is a world-leading technology company in providing solutions for the travel industry. We develop cutting-edge technologies to help our customers better serve the travelers. No? The purpose of our company is to make the experience of travel better for everyone, everywhere. And it is within this for everyone that our ambition to promote accessible and inclusive tourism is framed. We decided now to focus on inclusion and accessibility many years ago. It is our commitment, it is part of our social sustainability strategy, and our goal is to be an inclusive company and a catalyst for accessible travel through technology. And we focus on 4 pillars. The first pillar is to provide an accessible and inclusive workplace. We want to create an environment where all our employees feel valued and respected, ensuring that everyone at Amadeus, and particularly employees with disabilities, can thrive. Second, we want to offer accessible technology, and this means ensuring that we develop technology that is accessible for everyone, from travelers to industry professionals with disabilities that use our platforms. Third, we want to develop as well solutions that facilitate accessible travel, because we really believe technology can be an enabler. It can facilitate that everyone that wants and wishes to travel can effectively do so, and we want through technology to provide the best experience possible. And the fourth pillar of our strategy is industry collaboration. So we really believe we need to promote a more accessible and inclusive industry by working with others, by collaborating with organizations like the ones that we are here in the panel to ensure that we really move towards a more accessible and inclusive industry. And as answering your question about the starting point, inclusion is part of our core values. It's part of our culture. We are a company of more than 20,000 employees from 150 nationalities and very diverse backgrounds. And the journey towards accessibility started many years ago. But it is true that until very recently, our approach to accessibility had been very fragmented. And last year, at the beginning of 2024, we launched a comprehensive assessment to be able to understand what was the status of accessibility internally at Amadeus and what was happening externally. What were the trends, the regulation, what were our peers and customers doing around accessibility, what were the needs, the accessibility needs of the traveler. And we conducted interviews, we engaged industry associations and organizations like ENAT and WSHA in this exercise. And thanks to the outcome of this assessment, we were able to understand where were we, and most importantly, where we wanted to go. And that was the starting point to build our accessibility strategy and these 4 pillars that I mentioned at the beginning.
Thank you so much. So it's customer service focus that you have at Amadeus, because we all end up using the platform supported by Amadeus, and sometimes we are not even aware of it. And what I find interesting about Neha's case is that she's been operating from India for many years, and now she's also operating from within Austria. And Vienna is known as one of the cities with the best quality of life, but sometimes I run into very, I would say, positively surprising stories also from India. So could you tell us about some differences between maybe the 2 different markets when it comes to a business perspective? And what are some of the best practices that you would really focus here on from India and Austria that you really see the advances?
Sure. So as you said, these are 2 different worlds. One is a developed world, and the other is the emerging nations. So the good things about the developed countries is that the legal compliance is strong, it's implemented, and the businesses and stakeholders really get serious about it at times, because there is a law and there is a standard and we have to do it. So that's a good thing about it. But this is the hard part, or the legal part. But when it comes to emerging countries, these things don't work. And there are different level of challenges which people living in developed countries cannot even imagine or fathom. But then there is a soft power when it comes to accessibility, that the people, there is more empathy, there is more warmth, and they're willing to go out of the way to make it happen for you. And you do not have to go through, say, the disaster approval or the safety approval or any of the other approvals. You can just go ahead and do it in like 30 minutes, right? If you really want to do it. But another difference, big difference, is the realization that people with disabilities are dignified citizens of the society. So this comes in very much when you talk about countries like Austria or countries in Europe or US, but when you talk about emerging countries, you do not even acknowledge that disabled people exist. Like Igor was saying, what the experience he had with his nephew, I was asked in school by parents of my schoolmates, who pays your school fees? Because it's a perception that disabled people don't work. And so, you know, there's a huge difference, but the big difference also is that in, say, Europe or US, people with disabilities do have disability benefits, which do not exist in emerging countries, or they exist as pennies, so to say. So then in that case, the workforce is more inclusive and accessible because for survival, people really have to work and find employment and grow their career. So if you look at companies or organizations in emerging countries, they have more disabled people employed than you have in developed countries. And this applies to the hospitality organizations as well. We have hotel chains who have like 20–25% of the workforce as people with disabilities. But the unfortunate part, they're all blue-collar workers. None of them are in the leadership roles. So it's a huge difference because they are still not considered worthy of that. Of course, it's a different ballgame with IT and telecom, but then hospitality is where it is.
Thank you. Pablo, yesterday we had an interesting chat about your business perspective, and you were telling me I had a moral conviction on my job, but at the end, it's creating profit because each company has to be feasible and viable, and it has to create profit. But could you just tell us in this inspiring and simple language that we spoke about yesterday, you said everything, but you didn't say the word empowerment, but you explained it in a very direct and straightforward way. So what is your business case of accessible tourism when it comes to your company and running a business of your size? Because that's not a five-star hotel that's within a chain where everything needs to be regulated. It's a micro business, but how does it work when it comes to business perspective?
From our experience, what we have seen is that even at small scale level, you can make big changes, big impact. We worked, for example, a lot with local indigenous communities in the Amazon region. And it's just like small things that make a huge change. I still remember, for example, when the president of the community came and told us, you know what, maybe I won't cut that down this tree and you can bring some tourists. Then we thought, like, we are seeing a change, something is happening. And the same thing happened in terms of accessibility. We started bringing our groups. Someday he also came and told me, you know what, I don't want you to go through the back entrance anymore. We're making just the main entrance accessible. Yeah, ideas that come like from the people, that we don't have to give them guidelines or like regulations, as Nia was saying, regulations don't work where we are in emerging countries. So we have to find a practical way of making things work, of making things happen. We have seen this along the entire supply chain, hotels changing their like rooms. We don't get any support, any tax exemption, any tax incentive, nothing like that. When you do it, it's when you really see that there is an opportunity to do something good. And in our case, since we work like in tourism, you are also making a profit out of it. By doing that, we see that we are improving the situation for everybody. There's one island on Galapagos where we have been bringing groups a lot. And just the major seeing how we're bringing groups in, making people visible, because that's one of the challenges in our countries. Yeah, he decided to renovate the entire thing accessible without knowing it. When we arrived and when we saw it, we were impacted by the huge change that he made, And he made actually that island accessible for us now. And we are also seeing that way more and more organizations are being aware of accessibility. We are working, for example, on the international level with organizations like the Import Promotion Desk that help us come to the trade shows and talk about accessibility, offer this to the regular tour operators, but also on the local level, we see this change and this awareness. In our case, maybe because our president was a wheelchair user, so we have done lots of work in Ecuador in terms of making people with disability visible. Yeah, this is not the same, for example, when we go to Peru and Colombia, but we are seeing the same in Peru and Colombia. People follow. Once they see that one hotel owner makes a change, the next one is making the same one. So we are hoping that this can just increase and get more power so that we make really a huge change in emerging destinations.
Thank you so much. And now we'll go deeper into what labor inclusion is about in the tourism industry. And I'm going to ask a question to Glenn and Igor. So we just want to know about some success stories or challenges or even opportunities that we have seen and measured on incorporating the workforce with disabilities into the value chain. But before, I'm going to do a short Slido exercise where we are going to put 5 questions for you to vote. What do you think that is the most important thing to make labor inclusion a reality within the tourism industry? So I don't know, Willie, do we need to explain how it works? There's a QR code for Slido.
Slido should open, and then you'll be able, or you can go straight on slido.com. On the screen, you see this hashtag 2608959. And
So,
then please do take part in that question from Igor.
okay, so do we have the questions from the Slido 5 points, please, from Régie? From the back office. So there are 5 questions here. Please prioritize these strategies for fostering inclusive employment in tourism. 1 is most important and 5 is least important. Inclusive recruitment, that's the first thing. Awareness of the benefits. Civil society outreach, because we need partners to work with. Job adaptations, to tailor job descriptions to encourage applications from people with disabilities to apply for jobs, and global cooperation to boost global efforts geared towards inclusive employment. So you have these 5 options, and you can vote from 1 to 5, 1 being most important and 5 least important, and we'll read them in 20 minutes just as conclusions and wrap-up of this panel. So, Igor and Glenn. Igor, you worked a few years ago on a research on labor inclusion in hospitality, and you found some good practices and also some interesting conclusions. So what was the outcome and findings of what you've researched?
Yes, this was a question that the International Labour Organization asked. How is it going in the tourism sector with the integration of people with disabilities? And I think we were behind the curve, and maybe still are. The interesting thing, I'm going to take the first point that you mentioned for the Slido. What about recruitment? Because that's where the whole thing really starts. If you are excluding people at the point of recruitment, then you're missing a lot of potential talented people who could make your business more effective, perhaps more profitable, but also more suitable for people with disabilities. So we looked at right across the scale, right across the world, at different examples. And I'll just pick out that one example where one of our colleagues and hotels, Scandic Hotels from Scandinavia, you may have heard of them, they'd been working on accessibility for many years, 15 years or so at the time we did this study. And they were looking then at trying to get people into the business of hospitality. And so they were holding open days, in Norway this was, holding open days where people could come and present themselves and have a day working in a hotel and see what they could actually do. Because the point was that the Scandic felt that it was going to be an advantage to them. They could see how important it was to follow a checklist of accessibility features in the hotel, to train the staff, but they were missing something. They wanted to have the direct lived experience of people with disabilities and to increase the number of people with disabilities working in the hotel chain, because they could see that all those other things they were doing were good for business, and this could also be effective too. So along comes a guy who hasn't had a job for many years and found that he could actually work in organizing setup for conferences and events like this. And he just had to have the opportunity. He just had to have a chance to test himself and to test the company, to work with people for one day. And that led to a permanent job. So it's little examples like that which are so important. But we do create many barriers for people when they apply for jobs. Of course we do. We have to sort the sheep from the goats and the chaff from the wheat and so on. But you have to find the right people for the job. But the important thing is, I think that we have to have better systems in the HR departments for ensuring that people have a chance, an equal chance. And that requires, as we were talking about diversity and equality, it requires that the HR department has to think, how do we present this job and how do we attract people to apply for it if they have some additional requirements in the process of applying. So they may need a little more time, or they may need some assistance with one of the functions of applying, which has nothing to do with the job, but they do need some assistance to get over that first hurdle of presenting themselves. There are many other projects. We work a lot with European projects of different kinds on training, many projects to do with enabling people who are in marginalized groups to understand the soft skills and to present themselves in a job interview situation. Those kind of things are very important. And I think that the tourism sector has been missing out. The tourism sector has been missing out on engaging with people who have a disability or another ability, as some people would say, to ensure that they can really enrich their workforce by involving them.
Thank you. And we have examples where the workforce has a very high percentage of people with disabilities. For example, in Spain, there is Ilunion hotels, and some hotels have up to 70% of the staff with some kind of disability. And when they offer dinners for events, you do kind of a blindfolded tasting of food, so you would just feel how would it be just to smell food but not see what you're eating. So there are many inspiring examples, or lemon tree hotels from India. So imagine...
I love how you're just snagging all those examples. Those are great.
But I think you also have more examples.
I've got nothing else to say.
No, you do, you do. I know you do.
Well, and you got the other one with Scandeck. Well, it was very good, very good. I think, you know, from our perspective and how we as an alliance talked about this conversation, we're about future-proofing the industry. And it's really about risk management, and it's about growth opportunities, and within our world of sustainability. And this segment of the market is the most underserved market in the world when it comes to tourism. It's at least $1 trillion being left on the table. This is how we have to talk to the industry about what that opportunity looks like, and understanding, if you're thinking about it, because we are in the business of the people business, we're all about customer, we're ingrained as an industry that it's about the customer experience. But then when you got to think about it the other side, who's actually working in the force and being the labor behind that. And I think Nia and Pablo have hit it dead on. With those companies that have an inclusive environment within their workforce can better serve the customer. And the customer, as I mentioned, is $1 trillion being left on the table. So we have to do better. Our industry has to do better in providing more inclusion within the labor force that ensures that we can serve the customer better. And we also know that people want to work for companies with purpose, a higher purpose, as we see as the workforce comes into the market, and the younger people that are looking at industries to work, they're looking at what the purpose of that company is, and if it is simply to serve a customer, I don't think that's going to be good enough to retain the people or attract the workforce of the future. By addressing this and opening the door and including this element of the workforce that is so critical then we will be able to attract the workforce of the future. And so when we look at it, so you've hit them, yeah, there's no question, Scandeck, Lemon Tree, and Illumium are some of the shining examples, without question. But I would say a lot of the companies now, and I will say Marriott and IHG and Hilton, have built-in policies and procedures are being built into their approaches. Toolkits are being provided. Now, we work with brands primarily, but we are now having a lot more of the asset owner included in the conversation, because they're the ones that are actually really critical in this conversation. While the brands will have the standards that they would like to see happen, the asset owner are the ones that have to make that happen on the ground. And I will say that's where the work really needs to play out. And I will say that that's not happening as good as we'd like to see it. It's certainly improving. But I think it's really imperative that as a brands, as an alliance, we've come together. We're setting the standard. We're talking about net positive. We're not just talking about sustainability and just maintaining existing. It's really about taking that extra step. And that's very positive. We grew 400% as an alliance when we adopted a North Star called net positive. So that set a strong message that the industry was looking for a North Star to challenge itself. But we still got a ways to go. But I think if we keep hammering home as what we can do from our perspective, not only give the tools, the resources, the training that's necessary, we have to really showcase the ROI to get the attention and to ensure that the HR departments see this as a business opportunity as well as an important inclusive opportunity.
I think you made a good point about big mainstream brands. Because people know the big names. Because outside of India or Spain, people don't know about Illumium or Lemon Tree hotels. Normally, they wouldn't. So we always want to know about the big brands, what they're doing, because people normally follow the example, or they say, if they're doing it, we should do the same. And you would know better, but the big percentage of hotel rooms is within big chains.
Significantly growing, exactly. I mean, there's 8.2 million rooms in our alliance. So that's a real influence into the overall discussion. And I will say it's a high on our agenda as an alliance, that this is an important message that we have to give. And that's why I'm here, to really showcase that our industry is now ready to get into this conversation in a big way. And gentlemen like this who have been working hard for a long time on it is taking hold now. So I think it's exciting, and we just have to keep at it.
Thank you. And I think Esther would have an interesting example of labor inclusion projects and training of people with disabilities with Amadeus. What have you done and with which country?
Yes, as part of our community impact program, we are very proud of an ongoing project in Morocco. It's a training for employment program that is training 100 people with disabilities as travel agents. And it's a collaborative initiative, as I was mentioning before. Now, we really believe collaboration is key, to progress on this topic. And we are working in collaboration with ICID, which is the Spanish Agency for Cooperation for Development, with ONCE, that you as well mentioned it before, Igor, which is the Spanish Organization for the Blind, Union for the Mediterranean, and the Moroccan Travel Agency Association. And we are working together to train people with disabilities in soft skills, in customer service, in Amadeus technology, because we really believe this comprehensive approach to training is going to help them achieve the skills needed to find job opportunities in that region. So definitely collaboration key, because Amadeus by itself could not have achieved this, and we really believe that it is through collaboration how we can really progress on labor inclusion.
Thank you. And Pablo, yesterday we were speaking about training guides with disabilities at the indigenous community level and how much that can change your business, and you're just undertaking an initiative in that direction. Can you please explain it to us? Because I like the small scale of it and the impact that you described that it could bring into the community.
This is the new idea that we have. As a company, we have been trying to get people with hearing impairment from the States to Ecuador. Yeah? And the biggest challenge that we have in there is the American Sign Language interpreter. They are very expensive. We need at least 2 per group that we take down to join the group. So we're already seeing that this is one of the big challenges. And we have on the other side, the local communities, especially in the rural areas in Ecuador. It is very tough to get a job. There's no opportunities. And we have there the young people with disabilities that are not seen. So we want to find an alternative for them. So our idea now is to convince the company we're working with in the States to invest in the training of the local guides so they can learn the American Sign Language and they can be the interpreters of the groups coming down. That way we don't have to pay someone from the States, fly down. We are generating income on the community, which is what we want. I have worked a long time also like in development, and it is very tough to generate income for rural communities because most of the projects are based in agriculture, which is about volume and cents, really. While in tourism, it's different. For you to have an idea, the minimum wage in Ecuador is about like $500, and an interpreter in the community, a young person with a disability who can be the American Sign Language interpreter, will be making maybe $2,000 in 10 days. If we replicate that in every community, we have a very small investment from the company from the States, while we have a very high return for the communities, and we have a win-win situation, which is very difficult. Usually in business, when you want to win, someone has to lose. And that's what I like. One of the things I like a lot about accessible tourism is one of the few sectors where you have the win-win. When you do one thing, everybody wins. Yeah? So it's really nice, and I hope that we can really put this through and convince this company to invest, because that's what we see. It's not funding, it's investing in something that will help everybody around.
Thank you. And Neha, when it comes to international cooperation, as you said, you're working from 2 different markets that are different, but people at the end want the same life. So how can you make the international cooperation work between the companies and destinations that have good records of inclusive recruitment policies and also good business results when it comes to accessible tourism business with those that are just emerging or starting? So we all use the word collaboration, but it's not a mouthwash. So how is it done?
So I think both types of countries or demographics have a lot to learn from each other, and this applies to the standards and laws that we have been talking about for a while, that they be harmonized like across the hard powers and soft powers. But the people who have been doing it, like some of them are really great examples. Like I missed mentioning some of the examples. There is a resort in Canary Islands who just invested about 400 million and made the resort for 3 disabilities. But then, I think they are the best ones who have done anywhere in the world. And then there is a wildlife lodge in India that had a wheelchair-accessible vehicle, the only one in the country. But then they also are like, here you have the government funding also available, and then you have, there it's all privately driven. What they can, the newer players can learn from each other is, the older ones creating a metrics and monitoring those metrics, the amount that they invested in making in accessibility and inclusion, and what was its return of investment over time by, say, hiring an inclusive workforce or by catering to disabled customers from all over the world. And because our data shows over the years that a disabled customer spends 30% more on an average than a non-disabled traveler. And we also did a stakeholder consultation at United Nations Vienna in 2023, where we brought together stakeholders from like the tourism industry, like the tourism boards, the hotel chains, and companies and museums, and people with lived experiences of various disabilities from developed countries and developing countries. And the biggest finding was the establishment say we are doing everything. We are meeting all the laws and compliance, and our customers are happy. But the people are saying, hey, our needs are not being met. Hello. And this is, I think, an example that even the experienced ones that are doing it, they also have a learning to do from the newer ones who are getting into, hey, we screwed up. So apart from putting in a business case, they also say, this is where we screwed up, these were the challenges, and you don't make the same mistakes. Because if they can put a good example for the new entrants, there'll be good competition. And good competition, healthy competition, leads to good quality of service. And good quality of service leads to economies of scale. And that leads to affordability. Like if you look at a disabled traveler, the cost of traveling is way higher than a non-disabled traveler. So this is like a ripple effect that will go in, and the businesses have to drive it. And that can start from, of course, inclusive workforce, giving their business case to the newer entrants, but also sharing their challenges. Hey, we screwed up, and you don't make the same mistake twice.
Thank you. And Glenn and Igor, from the perspective of global standards in inclusive recruitment and accessible tourism in general, there are always pros and cons of having global standards for things, because in some countries it works to implement standards because there's a structure, while in others they can be only an inspirational kind of set of guidelines that would lead you through the process. So what is your stance on that when it comes to boosting the international collaboration, maybe through standards to make labor inclusion and accessible tourism as a reality?
Yeah. So maybe most people in the room know this, but there is an ISO standard on tourism for all, number 21902, if you haven't heard of it. But how many people have read it? Can I just have a show of hands? There's one. Thank you. So,
Two.
yeah, sorry, it's my eyesight. But there you are, you see. There is an ISO standard for many things, and you know all about, people working in tourism know a lot about standards, I'm sure, but not this one. And why not? Actually, this is an excellent standard, and it's worth reading, but you need somebody to interpret it for you. And that's the first problem with standards, I think, that the standards are written for standardizers more than for the tourism sector. And particularly when the tourism sector is made up of small and medium-sized enterprises for the large part, then people can't afford to buy the standards. I just wanted to get that one off my chest. But it's very important that we have standards, because that creates a common language. It creates a common view, a consensus view of what needs to be done and how it can be done. So in this standard, which ENAT was part of writing, and actually UN Tourism was the convener of the group that worked for so many years to make this standard, we value this standard because it exists and because now it's being rolled out with some good guidance documents from UN Tourism to interpret the standard and show this is what you need to think about, this is perhaps what you need to do to make your business more profitable but more accessible and inclusive. So there are materials out there. There's material to get to grips with all the aspects of the tourism chain, from having an accessible website to accessible cruise, accessible accommodation, and so on, guiding, everything is there. But we write about it, but as Neha is pointing out, it's how you do it that makes the difference. And there we need to really learn from each other. I just want to do a little advertisement. We're going to have the 3rd World Destinations for All Summit in Torino in October. This was the 3rd one after the 1st in Montreal in 2014, one in Belgium in 2018. And in Torino in October, we will be bringing together about 400 people who are working in accessible tourism to share their good practices, and standards and legislation will be part of the topics on the program, because we need to share experience, not just of how we have done things individually, but we need to look at the structures that we have for supporting accessibility in terms of national legislation and standards. We need to look at the processes which deliver on these legislation and standards, and we need to look at the impacts, the outcomes for people with disabilities and all the other customers who are feeling the effects of these standards or lack of standards. So I would say that basically we have to look we have to look to ourselves to get better educated, but also to work directly in a way which is more systematic so that we can get leverage on those standards and make them work better for everyone.
Thank you. Glenn. Glenn, you know
what do we say after that? You put this guy beside me, eh? That's really smart. I have nothing really more to add to that other than to say you're dead right. We've made it too complicated. The practitioner and the operator on the ground that we expect to do this, who are cleaning beds every day or turning tables, if we're going to speak to them in acronyms and numbers, they're not going to do it, as we know, because they have to get what's in front of them done. So we have to make it very approachable. And absolutely, standards are important, and that's why we work within a framework called Net Positive, and we have the pathway to get there, and that framework has been developed, and we made it approachable as well as we've created a simulator, business simulator. So you run a hotel for 7 years, and you see how your decisions affect your bottom line, your CO2 emissions and things like that, but also your social agenda. It's because we have to make it more approachable. And you have to kind of gamify it so it can help the HR department understand the opportunity, or the CFO or the CEO and those investment. Why am I making these business choices? Because this is how it affects your bottom line, or this is how it affects your social effort. But I can't say or add anything different than what Igor just said, so I will stop right there.
Thank you. By the way, we produced with WSHA and ENAT a set of guidelines for accessibility within the accommodation sector, hospitality and bars and restaurants, the catering sector, translating the ISO standard in the language of that sector. So to approach the sector according to 11 main areas of action where these private companies could react to implement the standards. Esther?
And they're free.
And they're free.
Absolutely.
We are not selling them. Esther, did you want to add something, or we should go to questions maybe before we read the slide results? Did you want to add something?
Well, I just wanted to reinforce the message of collaboration. No? I remember you telling us when preparing the panel, no, like a key takeaway, and I wanted to insist on that. No, that at the end of the day, we all win if we work together, and whether we are talking about accessible travel, labor inclusion, or any other social or environmental challenge of our sector, collaboration and partnerships are key. No, and if I could suggest like 3 ways in which we could work together, the first would be to generate knowledge, these guidelines that you mentioned, no, and increase awareness about accessible and inclusive tourism in collaboration with other industry players. I think that is key. No. Second, participating in working groups on accessible and inclusive tourism promoted by industry bodies or industry organizations like the ones that you represent. No, I think that's key in order to exchange experiences and learn from each other. And finally, like promoting and partnerships, strategic alliances with industry players, no, working together, discussing, no, trying to find common ways, common solutions to the shared challenges that we have. No, so all in all, no, I really believe, no, that. It went off? No, okay. So just like in a nutshell, no, collaboration is key if we really want to promote a more inclusive and accessible travel and tourism industry, and that's something I think we all have in common, no, and it's been present in all our speaking points.
Thank you. Willie, do we have time for 2 questions, or we should read the slide, the results? Sorry? Okay, so let's read the poll of the Slido. We had 5 points. Number 1, most important for fostering inclusive employment in tourism, and number 5, least important. So number 1 is building awareness of the benefits, highlight accessibility benefits for workers and customers. That is really what our sector needs. The second priority that is most important is inclusive recruitment policies and strategies to have inclusive hiring practices. Number 3 is job adaptations to tailor job descriptions to encourage applications from people with disabilities. Number 4 is global cooperation, boost global efforts geared towards inclusive employment. And 5, civil society outreach, partner with key groups to find qualified candidates. I would just interpret that maybe this point was put as the last one because the ultimate objective would be to have people applying on their own for a job and not going through an NGO that is representing their interests as a lawyer. So you would need people to feel encouraged to apply for a job themselves and not having an NGO as a mediator. That would be a perfect life without having civil society representing your interest at every instance of your life. So that would be a perfect case scenario. So we would have maybe time for 2 questions. Okay. They're all anonymous people, very mysterious. Is it the same person? Are they in here? Do you have data on the loyalty of persons with disabilities towards employers in the job market compared to other groups? Would anybody have that kind of data? Because it doesn't ring the bell, because that would be a very, very specific information. I don't know.
So there are some difficulties with actually asking employees if they have a disability, you know. This is perhaps interfering in people's private lives. We have to be careful in labeling and using these labels. But I think that's why I was pointing out in the point of recruitment that it was important to have a level playing field. And what we hear is a lot of, we have these anecdotes, of course, that people who have a disability tend to be more loyal. They've got a job and they get into it and they really want to work in the role that they've been assigned. And I think, you know, there are many good organizations who are working, for example, with people with Down syndrome who are working in the hospitality sector. We know there are many of these. And they have recruited and helped businesses to train. The interesting thing about having people working with Down syndrome interested me was that we found that the training that was given was so carefully done that in fact it was better for everyone to have that training, not just the people with Down syndrome. So there's nothing. I want to avoid any kind of stereotyping, and that we may be thinking that there are those people and other people who need something different. Once you get into the job, it's the way you organize the work that's important, and I think that's something that comes through. The more people, as you said in Ilunion hotels, the more people you have in a company who may have some diversity amongst them, they will find their way and also help to work with the other employees to find better solutions for everyone. That's anecdotal, but it's very valuable information, I think.
Thank you. Should we finish with this question, or should we finish with Neha?
I just wanted to add that because traditionally disabled people are like not included in the workforce, so in terms of providing a level playing field, you have to first go and tell them we are removing the barriers and anyone with any kind of accessibility need can apply. And then it's on them whether they want to disclose the disability or not. But you have to, like, this is an intentional going forward, an organization has to do and tell them we are inclusive and accessible and you can apply. Because you might just assume you are accessible, but that doesn't work.
Thank you so much. I wouldn't add anything else. I would give the floor to Willy to take over.
I think we need a big round of applause. Igor, Ivor, Glenn, Nea, Pablo, Esther, thank you so much.
Thank you.
It was absolutely fantastic.
Thank you, panelists, and thank you to the audience.
Thank you so much. So yeah, it was really good, and I think there's a few things that we've mentioned. I mean, we mentioned the Global Disability Forum here in Berlin in a couple of weeks, and now Igor just mentioned, I might have the name wrong, but perhaps it's called the Accessible Tourism Forum in Torino. And so there are things that we could be looking forward to, and I think in all of this, again, and I mentioned that a bit earlier, is progress is achieved when we travel together. And I think this is perhaps one of the messages that we can bring across. Now it's my honor to bring to the floor a rock star. Because she is, yeah. I'd like to welcome the UN Tourism Executive Director, Zoritsa Urosevic, to the stage for closing remarks. Please, let's give Zoritsa a warm welcome.
Thank you, Willie. Actually, I never asked for that photo to be there. And it was this morning receiving few messages from friends already on the ground, sending me my picture. So thank you, ITB. I think it was an interview we did 2 months ago with a journalist that came over from Berlin to Madrid to interview me on sustainability. And actually, it happened that that journalist is the editor-in-chief, which I didn't know. So you see, the world is good, and let's celebrate today. And I'm really happy to be with all of you today. Thank you, Willie. Thank you, Igor. Thank you, Ben, Georgia, my team. But thank you to everyone. I'm very happy because today I have learned. And I think this is how we should progress in life. Because if we learn something every day, we can better share. So I will go now formal from the key points that we want maybe to take away. There is only one thing that I missed here, but maybe this is food for thought. Umir? Sorry, your name. I have a visual memory. I need to write, so it's the first time I meet you. For the summit in October, maybe we should be looking at selecting new technologies and AI that can help and accelerate work that is done in the sector. So maybe we could be discussing together. We are happy to team with you and other partners to maybe launch a competition and look at options and opportunities, right? So first, thank you, the German Ministry of Cooperation, Federal Ministry of Cooperation, for making that day happen. And thank you for GIZ, which I know has been very enjoyable build-up with the team to be here today. We have a strong alliance with GIZ since many years, but during the COVID, we actually accelerated that because we started to do really strong work on gender. And we need to look at tourism to benefit local communities, to benefit people, and the individual and collective empowerment, and we need to look at the entire value chain. We celebrate this year the 50th anniversary of UN Tourism. We are proud to count on GIZ in driving this global agenda forward. And dear friends, I also want to thank you all for making the efforts today. First, we learn from professionals, as I just said, to shift our mindsets, to find solutions for destinations that need to embrace accessibility, to discover how to better serve the billion-dollar market, and to understand how tourists with disability traveling with 2-3 companions enhance the industry's revenue. I just want to share an insight that is coming from our yearly barometer, because as you know, we stand as a responsible organization for the world when it comes to statistics, not only for our members, but 193 countries in the world of the UN. The analysis that we did, the qualitative analysis on the challenges ahead of us, besides the inflation, the geopolitical instability, and so on, the 5th challenge is manpower. Many people have escaped the sector for many reasons. COVID was very guilty for that because people found themselves another job because they lost their job, but they found themselves happier in another job to stay instead of coming back to tourism. So I think that this is an avenue and an opportunity to take eventually to promote more opportunities for people with disability, and we can be working with, we're already working with ILO on that, on the decent work agenda. So that is really something that I wanted to underline as well as an opportunity. In order to build a solid business case, we as well need companies and destinations to work with end users with specific access, foster awareness. We just saw that on the pool, that was one of the key elements, upskill their employees, and systematically improve inclusion to avoid sporadic solutions and have better return on investment. We need as well to collect data. I think that we saw the gap here, and yes, we do not need to discriminate, but we still need to understand. Because we need to measure progress or challenges so that we can address it either with policy, I can say measures and legislation, or with business models. We need to adapt job description and workplaces environment. So we all share some simple desires. We wish to have a source of income, to travel, to enjoy our free time. And we want to enjoy life. These are universal aspirations that transcend our abilities. A more inclusive industry means more jobs, more travelers, and stronger communities. Professional networks must stretch across every direction, north-south, south-south, south-north, as we should learn from each other. UN Tourism and GIZ are inviting all of you to join us in creating equal opportunities for all people. Vielen Dank. And now I pass the floor to Willy again. Thank you very much.
Please stay with me.
Yes, I will.
Thanks so much. That's great. Thank you so much, Zoritsa. So we're actually coming to an end of this structured day. We're shift towards a more informal rest of the afternoon, but equally important, of course, as you know. So I'd like to welcome actually another leader in our community, Susanne Friedrich. She's the head of Agency for Business and Economic Development, to share a welcoming address with us. Susanne, please welcome to the stage. Thank you. We stay here.
Okay.
Well, thank you, Zoritsa, for your kind words. And I think now a very insightful afternoon is coming to an end. And I would like to introduce you to the last highlight of the day. And I would like to give you a warm welcome on behalf of the Federal Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development and the Agency for Business and Economic Development to this final network session. I think we have learned a lot today, and it's a good moment now to digest a little bit the information, maybe come up with some new ideas. We heard already one from Zoritsa, so you will have the opportunity to discuss all this now with your peers. Maybe you are not familiar with the Agency of Business and Economic Development, so just a few words about us. We act on behalf of the Federal Ministry for Economic Development and Cooperation, and we are the first point of contact for companies who want to engage in sustainable business in the Global South. So we have a group of almost 50 experts in Germany and around the world who advise companies on the instruments that the ministry offers to support companies, financial instruments, but also technical assistance instruments. And one of the sector we are working in is the tourism sector. Because it has a really great potential for sustainable business opportunities, it creates jobs, improves local economic development, local infrastructure, preserves nature, culture, and has other advantages. But it also can have a lot of risks if it's not controlled. So this is why we are engaging in the sector, and we had a highlight at the beginning of this afternoon. We had a group of CEOs here who were signing the Women's Empowerment Principles by UN Women. We have been working with the UN Women for more than a year now, and this ceremony really marked an important milestone in our commitment. It's a learning journey, we have heard that several times this afternoon, towards fairness for organizations across the sector and for the communities. And in the second part of the afternoon, our debates were dedicated to the inclusion of people with disability. And what we learned from our Secretary of State, Mr. Flassbart, was that the government, the German federal government, will continue working on inclusion and diversity also in the future. I think this is good news, and it's a good starting point for coming up with new ideas to engage in networks and continue working on the topics. And with this, I hand over to Zoritsa again. Thank you for the fantastic collaboration. I really want to give this back to you. We are very happy to have you on board and to do this journey together. Thank you. So I hand over to you again, Zoritsa.
It's fantastic, Zoritsa. a few words. Thank you so much. Susanna Friedrich, thank you so much. It's a pleasure. Zoritsa, last few words.
Please,
Network also means networking. And so I'll leave it to you to lead us into that network.
But you stay here because I had to stay here, Susanna.
Stay with you.
Yes, thank you so much. I will not be long. I really wanted to reiterate our gratitude and enjoyment that we had working with your teams. And I hope that this is going to be, as you just rightfully said, the beginning of a journey, because as I mentioned earlier, we have been working on gender issue. We can be working on accessibility. I know that Germany is a champion in Europe, and Europe is one of the, I can say, the most compliant region in the world when it comes to respect to humankind. I have Ben looking at me and saying, you know, yes, we need to do that. And I think that inclusive and universally accessible tourism is really a way forward. The project we were speaking about on gender was called Center Stage. We did it in 4 countries, but we will be really looking at duplicating and scaling up. Now, that said, when you explained, unfortunately, I could not join you this afternoon, when you signed with UN Women, because we had a ministerial debate on the future of tourism, which I needed to attend. And but I want to reiterate that maybe it is as well time, Igor and the team, that we use the Global Code of Ethics, which exists since 2003. We have a window for the private sector and associations. The Global Code of Ethics integrates the 10 principles of sustainability, but really in all senses, and it includes peace. So intercultural dialogue. So that is well we need to touch upon respect of cultures and respect of religion or respect of differences. It's all integrated there. So we will be advancing on that, and no more words, but just Prost. Thank you.
Applause, please. Thank you so much.
Really happy, huh?
Thank you so much, Zoritsa, Susanna. So just to finish the day, you're the lucky one who are here, because it's hosted by the BMZ and UN Tourism, and we have a networking event that's about to start, and it really is about celebrating collaboration and inclusivity. I think we've just got that now, which is great, and I wish you a wonderful rest of the afternoon. Maybe this is just a little bit of a hint. Tomorrow at the Orange Stage next door, the whole day is about responsible tourism. I invite you to come and join. There are fantastic sessions. Zoritsa will be back with a keynote, and also we have a climate scientist early in the morning who doesn't mince his word. It's a do not miss session. Come and join us and have a great networking session. It's been a pleasure. Thank you. Yeah. So the food is actually outside if you're interested in food. You have to go outside and you will find food, I've been told. Yes, for those of you who are hungry.